down, and then we had about another block to go through the woods.
Yeah.
That was the fun of going to get the milk.
Other than that, it wasn't much fun to go up there to get some milk. And I remember we used to go up there long before, they maybe were just milking the cows. And they had guinea hens. I remember I used to sit on the fence there, and the darn guinea hens would always sit next to me. And they were mean things, they pick at you all the time. Well, they had chickens, they had everything. They had cows, and they had horses.
Yeah.
Because they took the gravel out of the sand pit up here, that was a gravel pit, where the guy put the parking lot in, that was a whole gravel pit in there. When we were kids, they were always hauling gravel out of there. And Mike Showalter, and his other brother's name was John. Now, Mike wasn't too bright, but John was a very good-looking guy. He was a very nice guy. And Bob and I used to ride. See, these roads were all gravel. And actually, the road, when I was a kid, 127 was still gravel.
Yeah, like I said that, yeah. Now. At least from Angola out here was
all gravel. And they would gravel these roads, every spring for us. And they had one of these trucks, and then they'd ride here, and then what they do is release the bottom, and it would open up like that, and the gravel would fall. Well, Bob and I used to ride on top of that gravel, and we thought that was the most fun, when they leave the bottom open. And then we'd have to quick get off because, we could have gone down in there with that gravel. That was the craziest thing we ever did, and we thought that was the till Mother found out that we were doing it. And then I'm sure Aunt Anna found out we were doing it. Aunt Anna was always our savior up here. Aunt Anna couldn't swim.
That's Aunt Anna.
This is Aunt Anna Lookie.
Oh, Lookie. All right.
Okay. She couldn't swim. She didn't know anything about the lake, but she loved it because Uncle Emil loved it. And they loved to sit out here and hold hands and watch the sunset. But anytime we got...
But do you have a memory of them coming here in the late 20s?
Yeah.
From Winfield?
Winfield.
From Winfield. Okay. All right. So that goes back. Because
otherwise that was... You have to remember, too, there was a time when Uncle Emil used to go to New York because he was working on his master's degree, and Aunt Anna would stay here with us. Then I had Aunt Anna and Mother, and the two of them, neither one of them could swim or anything. But we got them in the water, and they both learned how to swim. And they could have saved themselves, that was about as far as they could go. And they'd huff and puff in front of Aunt Anna, was always having trouble with something, And every time we get in, and then she had, Jim is her son, Jim Lukey. And she was always afraid Jim was getting hurt, and Jim would get so embarrassed. Well, I remember one time Jim and I took the canoe out, and we were gone for a long time. We were way over in second and third basin and everywhere. I think we might have even been to Snow Lake that day. Well, then we started home, and we had kind of forgotten that it does get dark at night, And we got as far as Lone Tree Point, and we were doing pretty good, we thought. And then it just seemed like darkness just descended all of a sudden. Well, wham! And remember, there weren't all these cottages around here that time.
Yeah.
And it was pitch black out there that night. You couldn't see anything, but all we could see was one light. And remember, Mrs. Hopkins always had a light in her place. And she had light on in her cottage. So Jim and I just headed for that light. We figured as long as we went for that light, we couldn't miss, our place. And we never had to tell Aunt Anna that we were really scared to death. Just coming over the last day.
I got one story about traveling on a lake like that happened to Bob and me probably in the middle 30s when we were out fishing. It was one of those mornings we got up early, which you always had to do. My brother Bob had this religious feeling that you had to go fishing at 4:30 in the morning. We never caught anything in there before 7 o'clock, but you had to be there because it was light. In June, it was light enough to be out there. So we had to go at 4:30 in the morning. He'd get me out, and I was a faithful. I would never fail to get up and go with him. And my most joyful feelings about that were that we would be out there at 4:30, maybe on June 20th. It was still cold at that time of the morning. And but he was out there fanatically fishing already, and maybe I was just riding in the front of the boat while he was rowing the next place. The most wonderful feeling was when the sun finally came up over the trees. It was light outside, but there was no sun on the lake for a long time. Maybe not till 6:30. When the sun got over the trees and actually got onto the lake. And when that sun finally hit you and made you warm, that was the one. My most satisfying feeling at an early time. But for stories about traveling on the lake, to tell you this one morning, Bob and I were out fairly early, and it was one of those mornings, but I'm not sure how often that happens. I haven't seen it for many years, when the lake would be completely overcast. I mean, you couldn't see a thing.
We've had a few of those lately.
Maybe they've had some, because I'm not here all the time, but we used to have that a couple times a summer. There would be like a fog would settle over the lake, and you couldn't see anything. And we went fishing. We went down down to the point before you get to Glen Eyre, and all of a sudden this fog came in and just obliterated everything. But we said, well, we had decided, okay, let's go across the lake that way, right straight across the lake that way, and then go that way. And by that time, the fog lifted, we fish over there. Okay, that's what we're going to do. So Bob started rowing. When we went long distance, he rowed. When he casted, I rowed. But he rowed and rowed and rowed. He probably rowed for 45 minutes, maybe an hour. And when we finally came to land, we were precisely where we had started. So we always wondered after that, who could draw a map of where we actually went? What kind of a circle or oval, what did we make that we rode for 45 minutes? And that time, we could have got to the second basin and halfway across, because, he rode fast. He was big and strong, and when he made that boat go, it went as fast as a small motor would take it.
You've seen these electric motors out here. Well, Bob used to row that boat, and he could row it that smoothly and that evenly.
Faster.
Oh, yeah.
That we could troll out here.
Oh, we all.
In September, he would come up here, and we'd troll that whole shoreline for pike, and he could row that boat. And then I never forget the time I got the pike, and we were down there about where Judge Ryan's cottage is. Now that's where those two new cottages are.
Yeah, two new cottages are built. Yeah.
And I said, "Oh, Bob, I got one on." Oh, and then he'd get so excited. He got more joy out of seeing you catch a fish than anybody I ever knew. And he said, "Well, we're going to beat him. We're going to beat him." And I thought, well, it didn't seem to be that big. But anyway, the next thing I know, he's rowing in. And, of course, that's really shallow there,
Yeah.
And the first thing, the boat sticks because it's so shallow. The rocks are right there, So I'm still winding this thing. And the next thing is he's out in the water, clothes on and all, doesn't make any difference. Walking in the water because, by God, he's going to get that fish. He did, And all the while he's yelling at me, and if I'm not doing everything right, he calls me a dumb cluck. That was always his favorite.
You dumb cluck, yeah.
Yeah.
Real faster or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll say that.
Yeah. Well, and when we couldn't afford to go and buy bait, we could dig up worms, but every now and then he'd like to fish with minnows, see. And we had this great big net thing that was absolutely the most awkward thing that you ever wanted to see, but it came with the cottage. And of course it had its holes in it, but he had mended it up pretty much. And then we go along the shoreline here, and you remember there weren't all those cottages.
There weren't many ducks. There weren't many ducks.
And so you'd get all these shore minnows, So, well, we'd have to go along and scoop them and then get them up. Well, you got to remember, Bobby's much bigger than I am, And of course he's pulling in it. And all the while, all the way along the line, you dumb cluck, keep that up, do this.
Keep it down, keep it down, keep it down.
I was shouting these orders at me in the nastiest voices possibly, just like he was going to kill me. And there I am struggling along trying to hold this thing against the weight that he's pulling around on the other side.
And I'm up to the front of there, splashing the water. You're trying to scare the minnows into the net.
And all the while we're getting all this, how stupid we are and what dumb clucks we are. And all the while he's biting his tongue.
Now, do you have some good stories, Mort, or something you'd like to?
I think they've covered just about everything by this time. Oh, the only thing I wanted to mention, because we talked about our stoves and things like that, and the cooler, but once we had stopped using the cooler, we got what is known as an ice box.
Yeah.
And that must have been in about
I don't know what year that
the
was.
40s sometime. Or the
Oh no, before then. That icebox?
Yeah.
Well, we got a refrigerator by the 40 or something like that, I think.
I'm not too
Mhm.
sure. I can't quite
It
remember.
wasn't too long after Town of Helen started. I remember something. We got an old refrigerator.
Well, Mother and Uncle Emil bought that refrigerator. In fact, they bought that refrigerator still here for.
No, but
Well,
the
what-
ice,
what-
the
what were
ice
you gonna
box
about the
we-
ice box? What were you gonna say about the ice box?
Yeah. Yeah. And then we had to have a hole in the floor, didn't we?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's right. With the water, that's why the water drained
And,
out.
and you had a sign that you put up every day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, it listed 25, 50, 75, 100.
Yeah.
So that you could indicate to the guy in the truck how much ice you wanted that day.
Oh.
So you'd look at your ice box every morning and determine how much you needed to fill it up again. And a little bit later, he'd come down and stick it in your ice box for you. But it took a space, it was about 2 feet high and about a foot wide, about a foot deep. And
A
it-
lot smaller than the cooler was then.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah,
Oh,
yeah, yeah.
much, much
Mm.
And you
But
still had
then
the
it
cooler.
then it had on the other side, it had your place for
That's
your
where you
food.
put your food.
Oh,
there,
okay.
see?
This was just
That
for
was
the
just
ice.
for the ice.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
And
But see, the thing is about the ice, in the very early years, and maybe that was still the same man, because we had an ice man here on the lake.
An ice house.
At Souls Bay, on this side, there was an ice house. The man lived there, and he had a big barn. And evidently, in the wintertime, when the lake would get a foot thick with a foot of ice on it, he'd go out and saw up hundreds, maybe thousands of big chunks of ice. And then he would sell those. So the ice that we had came right off the lake.
Yeah.
Yeah, then I was over there once or twice. We went over there to get the ice.
Yeah.
I remember being over there at that ice house, and I was fascinated with
And it was
this
all
big
with
barn,
sawdust.
and he had his sawdust
Yeah.
and straw in this old barn, and all these chunks of ice packed in there. And so that man
You know where
actually
it
made
is?
some living.
You know where the two roads turn off? One goes over to Red Sand.
Yeah,
turn around
each
that
and
way.
one, yeah, and one.
And
yeah.
there's a big tree there.
Mhm.
Well, if you went right around that tree, right down, that's where it stood.
Mhm.
Right in there, and it burned down here. Quite a few number of years ago, it burned down.
Mhm.
But I met
you
somebody.
mean the barn itself?
Yeah.
Not his
I met
house.
someone in Angola one day that was telling me about the person who owned that, whether she was related to him or not. Every now and then you'll meet someone in Angola, you know, that knows something about the lake here. And I asked him what always fascinated was that name Palti. Why?
Palty Town.
Why was it called
Palti.
Palti Town? And it was actually a train stop for a long time. And I asked this one lady who's lived around here for I don't know how old she is, and she knows just about everything. And I said, "Tell me, why did they call that Palti Town?" She said, "You know, that's a real good question." She said, "You know, I don't know." But she said, "You know, that's something I'm going to look up," because she does research at the library on some of these things.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, "You know, I just always assumed that there was a family by the name of Pelty." But she said, "I'm not sure that's it at all." And I said, "Well, it's just an odd word, you know, an odd sounding thing." And I said, "I've always been fascinated by the name." She says, "I'll look that up sometime. She said, if I find out," she said, "I'll let you know." So I don't know if I'll ever see her again, if she's still living. Let me know. But
I thought we were gonna find out how it got its name.
yeah, I thought maybe it was Indian or something, you know.
It may have been.
And what I did find out though, that a lot of that land, you know, in that one house there on 200, that was owned by Sheets Oil Company. And
Oh,
I
really?
talked to Mr. Sheets, you know, the fellow that lives in that big house, you know, way in the back there, that I thought was the country club for a long time. On, is it Woolard? Or what's the name of that street? Yeah. And he was telling me, he said, no, he said, you see, I don't know how many boys there were in that family, but they own, Bing, all that land on the other side of the lake. And he knows all about the Showalters, or his family does, about the Showalters, like they own this side of the lake, see? And we think those were grants that were given to old Grandpa because he was a
Civil War. They were homesteaders.
Yeah.
Because they paid, as well known, they paid off the Civil War veterans by giving them land grants.
Yeah.
And that's how Mr. Showalter, who got this farm up here,
Yeah.
and that got this
And
land.
when you look at the land plat, now this attorney in Angola has all these old plats, and he showed it to us. And my land, it just seems to me like it covers everything down the line here and everything like over to Glen Eyre and all.
This one gal, Miriam Young, who's
Yeah.
part of our Hoosier Hills group, she knows more about this
Yeah.
section of the country because her family has lived here for years, and they had a farm
Yeah.
up there by
They
where the Holiday Inn is
yeah,
now.
they had the farm where the Holiday Inn is.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And
You know, when the terrain has changed around here so much that as I say, I haven't come back here as regularly. You know, some of the kids have, like you, and have come here much more regular over the last 20 years than I have. Like my brother's boy George, he told me once that he hadn't missed coming here except for 1 year in 45 years, or 43, or whatever age he is. He's only missed 1 year in 43 years. Well, over those same 43 years, I've only been here once out of maybe 10 times. He'd been here 42 out of those 43 years.
Yeah.
But the thing is, the early years, so I come here and I see these things change, like this whole complex of Highway 69 being built and all that, which just still confuses me. Like this corner where they all come together down here with the Holiday, I can't figure that out. I have no idea where I am down there, or where Highway 27 is, or
I have to take you
I
off
never
right
knew
away.
there was a Highway 121 until I got a trip back on that about 2 weeks ago. I didn't know that 121 went past Snow Lake and all that.
Yeah.
I never knew that. Anyway, but the thing is that when we were kids, that was a primitive area, and we used to go nearly every year. We'd take this hike. And we would just take off up here through the woods. And we would walk down toward Glen Eyre for a certain distance. And then we'd find a certain field out there, a sort of meadow. And I don't know how we knew this way, who first discovered it, but we sort of knew how to get there. So we'd walk down toward Glen Eyre, then we would go and get there, almost there, and we'd find this meadow.
Yeah.
And we'd walk across that meadow, then through some more fields, and then along some roads, and then we'd finally see where we were going, because there was a high hill over there. A real high hill. It stood out from everything else. And we would that's where we were going. We'd go there, and we'd hike up there, and we'd walk up to the top of the hill, and we'd sit up there, and we could see all the lakes around here.
Oh yeah.
Oh, you can see lakes for miles
I know
and
where that
miles
is,
around. Now the thing is, I say if you've been away and you come back and there's all of a sudden a Holiday Inn and all that stuff, you're completely disoriented. So I had sort of a feeling of almost like a mystery, deja vu. About 10 years ago when I was here with a friend, and for one night, because there wasn't room at the cottage, it was the old cottage, we stayed at this Holiday Inn. And so I went out for a walk in the morning, and behind the Holiday Inn, there's a high hill goes up. And I thought, I wonder if that's the hill that we used to hike to from the other way. So I climbed up there, but I couldn't tell. Maybe it was still farther. We didn't go that far, maybe.
no, I was thinking too. There's another high hill, and it's across the road from there, and it's back where this lady has this shop. It's Aaron's, and if you go back on the hill behind her house, you can look over and see. all the different-
See, there was that hill.
Yeah.
And I would sure like to get back there because we used to hike there every year. And when we would finally achieve that, which was a very daring hike because we went through forests, we went through meadows, we went through lots of private property.
Yeah, you know, that's the thing nowadays. Everything's fenced
that's
off.
all taken. You
Yeah.
can't go through those places now. You know, no trespass. There were no trespassing signs. They might shoot you, but they didn't warn you before they did it. That was the only difference, you know. They shoot first and tell you later, no trespassing. But that was so idealistic to climb, find that place, climb that hill, and then sit there in great satisfaction and say, we sort of own the lake country. This is the lake country.
I always thought too that really, truly, this was our lake. This was the lake, and we were its owners. And I never felt bad about walking any place. And now, when you walk down there, people kind of look at you, you know, like, what are you doing now here? As long as you stay on the roads, you're all right, you know. But even down here at Glen Eyre, I used to know everybody in Glen Eyre. And now some people look at me and, where'd she come from, you know?
Now,
And I never had that feeling before. It was just hi, so-and-so.
maybe people don't realize that you used to be able, I don't know if you can still, I guess you can still get there. But you just up behind our cottage. We know that this fella cleared out the trees, and then you can get, and the other day I went up there on his high road there, he's built there, and you can see a lot from there. You can see quite a bit from there.
You can see Lake James from there.
You see most of Lake James from there. But we used to go up higher than that, up into the apple orchard.
Yeah.
You go up one rung higher, and you're a lot higher. Now, I don't know if you can still, well, is the apple orchard all gone? Well, they have the Verberg thing.
Yeah.
There's a buffer between, well, let's see, because when we go there, we go to the top of the gravel pit.
Yeah.
And then up into there you gotta crawl through a fence.
Yeah.
You crawl through a fence, and pretty soon you got to the apple orchard.
Yeah.
And you can go and climb up in the apple orchard. Then you got to a place, and you could really see all of Lake James.
Yeah.
Because you're really high there. You don't realize how high that is.
Yeah.
And so you walk up there and get to a place where it's, but I know that about 20 years ago, that means 30 years after I used to go there very regularly, maybe 20 years ago, I went up there and said, well, where's the view? And then I realized the trees had grown up. And the bushes had grown up. In the drought, those things are all low. In the 30s, those things were all in the drought years. And you could see. I remember one time Jim Lukey and I went up there. The reason he went way up there with me. He says, Bing, I'm going to take a walk. He was about 20 years old, see. And we walked up there, and we finally find one of these. He went, so we want to go up there and get that view. You know, get a tremendous view. So we went up there, and we sat down, and then and as a young American boy, he flipped out a cigarette. He says, here's what I really came up here for. I'm going to have a smoke. Yeah, I want to have a smoke. See, he had started smoking, but he didn't smoke around his dad very much yet, see. But he would smoke by himself and all that.
And he had to go way up there.
And we walked way up. We got way up the hill. We finally got up there and sat down. Then he said, I'm going to have a smoke, see. So anyway, but I just think the view from around, I don't know if that's what would interest me is whether that's as accessible today as it was to us as kids. Because we go up there just to get a view of the lake.
Well, you know, no, it isn't, because old Tingle here. Now, even you got to be careful if you walk up that road there. Don't let Tingle see you, because he puts signs up then and everything else. But I have walked, you know, behind Dan and Julie's place, and then you get into that woods. And I used to take Jake up there, and Jake